She was the trophy wife, beautiful, silent, underestimated. When her husband humiliated her in front of the entire boardroom, she didn't cry, she smiled. 3 years later, his empire fell, and she signed the papers to buy it. He used to say I was nothing without him, that every dress I wore, every luxury I touched, every breath I took was because of his name. I believed him once. I believed that love meant sacrifice, that silence was strength, and that loyalty would protect me. But the night he made me stand in front of his entire board and called me just decoration, something inside me snapped quietly, beautifully. I didn't scream. I didn't defend myself. I smiled. That same practiced, perfect smile he taught me to wear at galas and charity dinners. But behind that smile, I made a promise, not to him, but to myself. I would build something of my own, not to prove him wrong, but to remind myself what I had forgotten, that I was capable of far more than being someone's silent accessory. That night, while he drank champagne with his partners and bragged about his latest deal, I packed a single suitcase. No jewelry, no cards, no designer gowns, just my old laptop, a notebook, and the woman I used to be before I lost myself in his world. I left before dawn. No goodbye, no explanations. Only a note on the marble counter. You're right. I can't live without purpose. I had nowhere to go, but for the first time in years, the air felt light. My hands shook as I typed my first email to an old college contact, a friend who once told me that confidence can't be inherited, it's built. She replied within hours, offering me a chance to assist in a small consulting project. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't even pay much, but it was mine. Days turned into months. I worked from a tiny apartment where the heating barely worked. I learned to budget, to plan, to rebuild. Every failure hurt, every rejection burned, but each one made me stronger. I spent nights studying market trends, digital strategies, learning how to lead instead of follow. I watched his company in the news, booming, expanding, and then slowly cracking under its own arrogance. 3 months in, my consulting project grew. Clients started referring me to others. They said I had something rare, clarity. I wasn't just giving advice. I was rebuilding systems, reshaping entire companies with the precision of someone who'd seen power up close and knew its weaknesses. Then came the moment that changed everything. A major investor called me after reading a case study I'd written under my new company's name, Elysian Strategies. He said he admired the courage behind my words. He didn't know who I was. I had scrubbed my identity clean. But he offered funding to scale my work into something bigger. I didn't hesitate. I registered the company officially under my mother's maiden name. No one connected it to him. No one needed to. I built a team, not of perfection, but of purpose. People who had been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed. Together, we worked days, nights, weekends. Our office was small. Our dreams weren't. Within a year, we had clients in 5 countries. My husband, or rather, my ex-husband, had no idea. His empire was showing cracks, while mine was quietly rising. The same business partners who once laughed at me during dinners were now reaching out to my team for consultations. I still remember the first time our logos appeared side by side, his at the top of an article about financial mismanagement, mine beneath it in a feature titled, "The Silent Founder Changing the Rules of Business." The irony was delicious. He called me that night. His voice trembled between anger and disbelief. "You," he said, almost whispering, "you built this." I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence speak for me, just like he once made me do. Then I said softly, "You always told me I couldn't live without you." "You were right, I couldn't. Until I did." And I hung up. But revenge was never the goal. It was about reclaiming myself. The woman who once believed her worth depended on someone else's validation had turned her pain into a blueprint. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of doubt had been recycled into fuel. The following week, his company filed for bankruptcy protection. Scandals, mismanagement, and debt. The same arrogance that built his empire had destroyed it. And then came the offer. His shareholders reached out. They needed a buyer to salvage what was left. I signed the deal quietly, without cameras or interviews. When I walked into that boardroom, the same one where he once mocked me, everyone stood. But this time, not out of pity or formality. Out of respect. He sat there, defeated, eyes empty, watching as I placed my signature beneath the company name that used to belong to him. For a moment, time stopped. The past and present collided. The woman he broke and the woman he never saw coming. I didn't gloat. I didn't remind him of his words. I just looked up and said, "Thank you for teaching me everything I shouldn't be." That was the day Elysian Empire was born, not from revenge, but from resilience. A brand that stood for strength, integrity, and rebirth. And as I walked out of that glass building for the last time, I finally understood. Empires aren't built from wealth. They're built from wounds that refuse to stay open. Outside, the sky was painted gold, the kind of morning that makes you believe in beginnings. I wasn't his shadow anymore. I wasn't the decoration, the silent wife, the woman behind the name. I was the name now. And as the city lights faded behind me, I whispered the same promise I made that night years ago, this time, not out of pain, but power. I will never forget who I am again. Success changes you, but power reveals you. And as my empire expanded, I began to see both, in others and in myself. Elysian Empire wasn't just a company anymore. It was a movement. Women, men, dreamers, and believers, people who had been silenced by arrogance, found a place where their ideas mattered. Our clients grew from local firms to global corporations, and suddenly, my voice, once ignored, echoed in rooms where I was once invisible. But with every triumph came whispers. She must have had help. It's her ex-husband's money. She can't be that smart. They said it softly, never to my face, but I heard every word. And each one reminded me why I started. Fame brings back ghosts. One morning, as I stepped into my office, I saw a familiar name on my assistant screen. Daniel Harrow. The man who had once called me decoration, now wanted a meeting. My team hesitated, waiting for my reaction. I told them to schedule it. They didn't understand why, but I did. Closure doesn't come knocking often. Sometimes you have to open the door yourself. He arrived in his usual perfection. Tailored suit, polished shoes, confidence slightly cracked. Time had taken some of his sharpness, replaced it with something heavier, regret, maybe fear. I watched him scan the office walls lined with global awards, magazine covers, and photographs of the people who built this place with me. His silence spoke louder than any apology could. When he finally looked at me, the arrogance was gone. "You've done well," he said quietly. I leaned back in my chair, calm, collected. "No, Daniel. I've done right." He smirked faintly, that same practice charm he used when he wanted to manipulate a conversation. But it didn't work anymore. He wasn't speaking to the woman he once controlled. He was speaking to the woman who bought his failures and turned them into foundations. He wanted a partnership. His new venture was struggling, and he claimed it could complement mine. A merger, he called it. The old me would have seen this as validation. The new me saw it as a test. So I listened. I let him talk about synergy, innovation, legacy, all those shiny words that hide desperation. Then I asked him one question. "Would you have made this offer if I were still your wife?" The silence that followed was pure truth. He left that meeting without an agreement, but the impact lingered. Not because I rejected him, but because he realized I no longer needed his approval to feel powerful. A week later, I stood on a stage in Paris, accepting an international leadership award. Cameras flashed, headlines bloomed, and for a moment, I saw a reflection of my past in the lens, the woman who once stood behind a man now standing on her own stage. I didn't dedicate the award to anyone. I simply said, to every person who was told they couldn't, may your silence become your strategy. The applause was thunderous, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. Power attracts envy, and envy breeds betrayal. One of my closest executives, a woman I had mentored, had been secretly leaking client data to competitors. When the truth came out, the betrayal hit harder than any insult Daniel ever threw at me. She said she did it because she wanted what I had: influence, respect, recognition. I didn't fire her immediately. I asked her one question. Did you think stealing my crown would make you a queen? She looked down. No answer. Because she knew the truth. Power taken isn't the same as power earned. That night, I didn't sleep. I walked through the empty halls of my empire, the place that once felt like freedom, now echoing with reminders of how easy it is to become what you once escaped. I realized something vital. The empire wasn't about dominance. It was about purpose. About proving that strength isn't loud, it's consistent. So, I made a decision. Instead of chasing expansion, I turned inward. I built mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs, especially those who were once told they were too small, too quiet, too not enough. I wanted to create a world where no one had to earn respect through survival like I did. Months passed. The world began calling me the Phoenix Founder. I smiled at the title, but in truth, I never rose from ashes. I walked through fire and built a house in it. And then, one day, life offered me a full circle. A charity gala, the same kind of event where I once stood behind Daniel, silent and smiling. Now I was the keynote speaker. As I walked to the stage, I saw him across the room, surrounded by faces that once ignored me. He didn't approach. He didn't need to. His eyes said everything. When I spoke that night, I didn't talk about success or revenge. I spoke about value. How losing everything is in the end. It's the invitation to start differently. Empires, I said, aren't built from wealth or legacy. They're built from endurance. From the quiet moments when no one believes in you, but you keep going anyway. The crowd rose to their feet. Cameras flashed again. But what mattered most wasn't the applause, it was peace. Real peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop running from the past because you've already outrun it. After the event, as I walked outside, it began to rain, soft, steady, cleansing. I remembered that night years ago when I had left his mansion with just a suitcase. I looked up at the sky and whispered, I did it. Not out of pride, but gratitude. Gratitude for every broken piece that became a stepping stone. Back in my office, I kept one photograph on my desk, not of my success, but of the old apartment where it all began. Cracked walls, a borrowed desk, a window with no view. Because I wanted to remember that every empire starts small and that humility keeps power human. A journalist once asked me, "What's the secret to your success?" I smiled and said, I stopped chasing approval and started building purpose. Today, Elysian Empire runs across continents. But when people ask what I'm most proud of, it's not the numbers or the fame. It's the fact that somewhere out there, a woman who once felt invisible watched my story and decided to start her own. That's legacy, not wealth, not revenge, but influence born from survival. And if you ask me now whether I miss the life I left behind, I'd tell you this. Sometimes losing everything is the best negotiation you'll ever make with fate. Because in the end, the empire I built wasn't just a business. It was me rebuilt, refined, and finally free.